Hey guys, Mike here with EBR, and this is the Radkick from Rad Power Bikes. It's a no-nonsense commuter that skips all the frills, but it nails the basics. Think of it as the younger sibling to the already more powerful and tech-packed Radster Road. If you've been looking for a commuter e-bike that keeps things simple, no nonsense, and ready to roll, let's see if the Radkick here makes the cut. Now the Radkick here is a Class 2 e-bike. Now what that means is you'll get pedal assistance and throttle assistance all the way up to 20 miles an hour, which is where the assistance will cap. There's no unlocking this to a Class 3. It is a true Class 2 e-bike. Now this comes in two configurations. This is a belt drive single speed configuration, or you can get a 7-speed chain drive configuration. Now, the 7-speed chain drive will be priced at $13.99, and this belt drive version is priced at $15.99. Now, one cool thing about this bike is it's both UL 2849 certified and the battery's 2271 certified. Now, when it comes to colors and sizing, this bike comes in one frame size across two colors, but there's a caveat there. If you get the belt drive, you're going to get the color here, Midnight Blue, which is a nice deep blue glossy paint with a little bit of metallic flake inside of it. And then if you opt for the 7-speed chain drive version, that comes in what they call an Arctic blue, which is kind of a cool, almost icy blue, almost the opposite of this dark midnight blue. So whether you want ultralight blue or deep blue, it's going to depend on the drivetrain you pick. Now, in terms of sizing, both come in the same one frame size, but that fits a pretty good range from 5'2" all the way up to 6'1". Now, when it comes to specific geometry numbers for this frame, we've got a nice low step through or standover height of just 17 inches. The reach up top is about 14.2 inches, but keep in mind, this has a 90mm adjustable stem on it. So as you move that stem back and forth for however you like to fit and ride, that will change your reach just a little bit as well. Now you've got about 7 to 8 inches of adjustability here in the seat post, and the wheelbase from rear hub to front hub or vice versa is 44 inches. Now I found with that shorter wheelbase and the wider bars up top, which we'll talk about in just a bit, it's got a very playful handling to it. It corners nicely and quickly when you want it to, versus some more of the longer drawn out wheelbase bikes that we get. And those tend to just be a little bit slower and sluggish in their handling. So this short wheelbase with the flat bar up top just really gives it a fun, playful ride. And finally, the max capacity or max payload on this is going to be 300 pounds. Now, when it comes to tires and wheels, they opted for a 27.5-inch setup. So both wheels are going to be alloy black wheels, and they are sized at 27.5 inches. And now these are wrapped in Chow Yang tires that have a nice semi-slick tread pattern on them, and they're sized at 27.5 by 2.25 inches. So a nice middle ground of not going as big as a big MTB or fat tire bike, but not going so narrow that we're in road bike or gravel bike territory. This 2 1/4 is a nice middle ground, and I think suits it well for its kind of just relaxed commuter vibe. Now, when it comes to PSI on these tires, the tires themselves are super fast rolling and slick, as you could probably guess because they have very limited tread bumps on them. But they recommend running between about 25 to 55 PSI in these tires. I've been running low 30s, and I found that's just a nice balance of still having comfort on the road and absorbing some of the minor imperfections, but also still having enough air in them that I have grip and speed when I want it. Now, when it comes to things like commuter perks or fenders and racks, this bike is set up quite well. You've got fender coverage front and rear, and these are metal fenders. And then you've also got a rear rack here that's bolted to the frame and integrated LED tail light on it, and this rear rack is rated for 55 pounds. Now, speaking of lighting, up front there is a headlight on the bike, and it's got a reflector built into it, and it's rated at 50 lux for brightness. Now 50 lux is not going to be super bright, but it's going to do a good job of helping you be seen when you're out there riding around, specifically in cities or traffic like a bike like this was kind of designed to do. And if you want to add more to your bike besides just this rear rack, they actually have several options for you. So we've got not only the mounting points for this rear rack and the fenders, but you've also got two bosses here on the seat tube, and then you've got mounting points up front for a front rack or basket as well. So you can kind of kit this out in a way that you see fit, from front racks and rear racks and fenders. You've got some options there, and that's nice, especially on a commuter bike like this. All right, so for the heart and soul of this e-bike here, the Radkick, it's gonna be the motor and battery. Now, starting in the rear, we have a 500-watt rear hub motor. Now this motor puts out 40 Newton meters of torque, and it has a torque sensor for its activation, along with 5 levels of pedal assist. Now, if you're not familiar with a torque sensor, it's a more upgraded version of motor activation when it comes to e-bikes. Typically on lower end e-bikes or entry-level e-bikes, you'll see a cadence sensor, which basically just determines if the pedals are moving to give you all its power. But a torque sensor will measure how hard and how fast you're pedaling, and it will try to gauge the correct amount of power in return to try to match your effort for a more natural pedaling feel. Now, when it comes to torque sensors, they come in all different types as far as how they're programmed and how they feel when you're riding. This one, I would say, after riding it all week, is very nice. It's dialed in, it's very smooth, it's very subtle. You don't notice it punching on and punching off like you can with some e-bikes. So I think they did a great job with the torque sensor. Now, when it comes to everyday riding around, I'll take you on a ride here in just a second, but just some initial thoughts. I think the bike has sufficient power for every day-to-day riding around town. But I will say, if you're someone who looks for steep hills or has a lot of steep hills, or just likes to go punchy and fast on their e-bike, this is going to be one that's more reserved. And if you're looking for that, the Radster Road is offered by Rad Power. It's just about $500 more, and that one has a much more punchier, powerful motor. But this one, for day-to-day Class 2 speeds, I'd say it's programmed just right. And also, when it comes to motor noise, this is definitely a top 1, 2, or 3 quietest motors I've ridden on e-bikes for gear hubbed motors. Now, sure, when you get to $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 e-bikes with high-end mid-drives, those are also quiet as well, but this sub $2,000 price point is by far one of the quietest e-bike motors that I've tested. Now, when it comes to the battery, we have this fully integrated 36-volt battery. Now, this battery has 10 amp hours, giving us 360 watt hours of juice to work with. Now, it also comes with a set of keys, and I'll show you how this battery can be removed. All right, so this bike comes with 2 keys here. You put it in the key hole, turn it forward, and that will release the battery from the frame. Now, this battery is 2271 certified, and it comes with a 2-year warranty along with the rest of the bike. Now, one cool thing that Rad Power Bikes does that I have not seen other e-bike companies do yet is all their batteries, or at least the last 3 that I've used, have this Safe Shield technology. Now, Safe Shield essentially is individually isolating each cell in its own thermal barrier. So normally the cells inside of a battery are all next to each other, and should one get too hot or there be some sort of malfunction, it could potentially cause one to get too hot, and then ultimately all of them have some sort of heat runoff, or even worse, a fire. But in the event here that you have a runoff with this battery, or one of the cells gets too hot, in theory, being isolated into its own thermal barrier should help make this a much safer battery. And I just think it's really cool they're trying to go even beyond that 2271 certification. So to put it back, you'll simply go the opposite way. I'll put the bottom in and then snap the top in place. Now, when it comes to range on this, Rad advertises this as having up to 35 miles of range. Not a ton of range to ride home about, but for most people's daily commute or even a couple day commute, it's going to be more than enough. But I went ahead and did my own range test on this, and I found that in PAS 5, so the highest speed you could go, this bike still got 24 miles. And when I brought it down to PAS 1, which is actually still a really usable range, that PAS 1 level, I still got 38 miles, surpassing their estimation. So whether or not you have a quick ride to the office, this could potentially be something you don't have to charge all week. But for those of you who want to go further on your e-bike, or want to just maybe charge it once, ride all week long, and you have maybe a 10-mile ride to your job, well, that would be kind of difficult for a bike like this. But for day-to-day usage and general commuting, I think this is a solid range, and it did well in the range test. All right, so when it comes to components and drivetrain, like I said at the beginning, this bike comes in 2 flavors. You can get a 7-speed chain drive like you're used to in most bikes, or you can opt for what we have here, which is the carbon belt drive. Now, people prefer carbon belt drives for a couple reasons. One being they're very quiet, no metal on metal parts going, but 2, they're also very low maintenance. A typical chain, the pulleys can wear out, they need lubrication, they can rust, they make noise, but a belt drive, a carbon belt like this, requires no lubrication, is not going to rust, and it doesn't need to be serviced for, they say, up to 10 to even 20,000 miles in some situations. Now, Rad Power doesn't specify how long you can go on this belt drive, but generally speaking, in the bike industry, carbon belts last somewhere between that 10 to 20,000 mile mark. So lots of life before you ever have to worry about that. And it's just a really cool setup. Now, it has a 22-tooth rear cog and a 64-tooth front chainring. Now, that combination on a Class 2 bike, I think it's great. I have pedaling feedback. I have feedback in the pedals all the way up through 20 miles an hour and even into the mid 20s and upper 20s without it ghost pedaling. You don't feel like you're spinning and doing no assistance to the bike. It's actually geared, I think, really, really well. But I'm also going to go back to that caveat. If you live in an area with steep hills, or you live in an area with just lots of elevation changes, you may want to opt for that 7-speed chain drive just so you have some flexibility in how you tackle those steeper inclines. Now, on this guard here, or excuse me, on this belt drive here, we have a belt guard, and we also have 170 millimeter alloy cranks mated to aluminum platform pedals made by Wellgo that have reflectors on them, as well as some traction studs for grip on the bottom of your shoes. Now, when it comes to braking on the Radkick, we've got hydraulic disc brakes. They are unbranded. They're 2-piston calipers, and they're mated to 180 millimeter rotors that have a thickness of 1.8 millimeters. Now, when it comes to the saddle here, the saddle here is a touring saddle, so not super wide like a cruiser, but also not super narrow like you'd see on more of a performance-oriented bike. It's a nice middle ground, and I found it to be comfortable enough. And you can adjust this with a quick release lever right here, so no tools needed to make adjustments on the road. Now, up front, this bike does have a suspension fork. Now, this suspension fork is unbranded. It's a coil suspension fork, and it's got 80 millimeters of travel to use on your rides. And it has a lockout option to prevent any compression should you not need to use it, or you can flick it back on. It's really quick and easy to do. Now, moving up here to the cockpit. So starting off, we have a adjustable 90 millimeter stem. This will help you kind of dial in a fit that works best for you, and it'll also change that reach based on how long your arms are, what your body position to be. The adjustability in the stem is just a nice way to kind of make the bike fit you just a little bit better than it normally would with a fixed stem. Now, the bar on here is an MTB style flat bar, which I personally like seeing on here. Wider bars will just give you a little bit more control and stability when you're cornering versus a more narrow cruiser like Dutch cruiser style. This, I thought, helped with the 44-inch wheelbase. It just made it more playful, and I enjoyed it. Now, this is 710 millimeters wide, and you have black rubber ergonomic grips on either side. Both sides also have hydraulic disc brake levers. Over here, you've got a twist throttle, so like a motorcycle twist throttle, and your obligatory e-bike bell. There we go. Over here in the middle, we've got the headlight, the 50 lumen headlight. And then general wiring on this is, I'd say it's fairly clean. They have tied up everything together and then route them into the frame down below, but there is some exposed wiring up top. Finally, over here on this left side, we have the display and control buttons for the bike when you're riding it. Now, this bike has no app connectivity or super tech features that some people look for in more modern e-bikes. But if you're looking for that, Rad Power has a kind of older sibling to this called the Radster Road. And it's basically this bike that's got a lot more tech features, app connectivity, more powerful motor and battery, and it's about $600 more. But if you're looking for that extra in the same type of bike, definitely give that one a look. But for this one today, let's go ahead and take a closer look at this display and just kind of show you the ins and outs of what you get with the display. All right, so this is the basic setup or home screen on this bike when you turn it on. Up top, we've got a bar battery meter as well as a numerical. I like having both because sometimes with a bar, you don't really know how much is left, especially towards the bottom. So having a precise number is much more helpful to me. Now, as far as buttons go, you have an on-off up top, a mode button or menu button down below, and then your up and down arrow keys, as well as a port for USB Type-C to charge your phone while you're riding or other devices. Now, over here is your light indicator. It's showing green because it's currently on. If you want to turn the headlight off, you'll simply hold the up arrow and that will turn off the light and the indicator goes away. To turn it back on, you simply do the same thing and your light's back. Here in the center is our speed in miles an hour, and down below is the 5 levels of pedal assist with level 0 to where if you just want to pedal the bike and with no assistance at all, you can simply do so. And on a lighter bike like this, it's easy to do it. And then you've got all 5 levels of pedal assist. If you hold the down arrow, that will enter walk mode, so you can kind of walk with the bike instead of having to pull it, and you just hold that down and you'll see it goes into walk mode. I'm not going to keep holding that because the bike will walk away. Now, if you want to do any type of playing with the settings, there's not a whole lot you can do on this, but I'll show you what is available. You'll simply hold the down arrow and the menu button, and that will give you these settings you can adjust. You've got basic settings, you've got a section called information, and then you can reset everything. So let's start with the basic settings. And in here you have units, so you can change between kilometers or miles an hour. Maintenance, which will tell you about maintenance intervals and reminders on when to maintain the bike. Below that is backlight, essentially how bright this display is on a scale, I think, of 1 to 5. And then auto sleep, which is how long the bike takes to just power off on its own after you've stopped using it. Now, to get out of here, we'll simply put it up on exit and then hit the menu button. And then we can go into information, and that's going to show us information about our display and controller. I'll show you one real quick. So the display, hit the menu button, and it tells you just the firmware information, the hardware model, and the serial number. So kind of any pertinent information you may need if you ever had to reach out for some support help. And then to get out of this, you'll simply hold that, hit exit. And then the other option on here is obviously reset, but we don't have any reason to use that. Now, to get out of this advanced settings section, you're gonna hold down the down arrow and the menu button, and that's gonna take us back to the home screen. So there's no app connectivity on this. It's kind of everything you need and nothing you don't, kind of like the theme of this bike. But let's go on a ride, and you guys can kind of ride with me, and we'll talk about how the bike feels out on the road. And then we'll go talk with Ben, our in-house mechanic, and get his thoughts from kind of just a bike mechanic's perspective. All right, friends, we're out here on the Radkick. And I'm gonna pull up my speedometer app here just to kind of help you guys see how fast we're going. When you get on this bike, the geometry is, it's upright-ish. I'd say more upright. It's a hybrid position where you lean into the flat handlebars here. And I think that actually aids the ride quality overall, the use of the flat handlebars, because you're pushing it does a couple things. One is having a flat wide bar kind of increases stability and control and makes kind of handling a little bit more playful and fun. Me coming from a mountain biking and road cycling, mountain biking specifically, flat wide bars are pretty common, and this really just adds to handling. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, if you went at home and took any bike in your garage and just put your hands closer together, the handling feels way more unsteady and a little bit nerve-wracking. And as soon as you come out just 6 inches, it gets very playful and easy. So wider bar, flat bar, MTB style instead of the Cruiser, I think was a really solid choice. The motor, I don't know if you guys can tell, makes very little noise at all. I'm in PAS5, which normally would be like the highest a motor sound it will make. In fact, I'll use the throttle from a dead stop and see if we can hear it. So we'll go 3, 2, 1. And definitely reserved off the line, but we're up to 10, 15, getting there, 19. Ooh, come on, baby. 20 on the bike speedometer. But as you can see, it certainly is a reserved 500 watt motor. It's not something that's trying to win sprints or be super jumpy off the line. It's great at what it's designed to do, and that's to be a straightforward, just get around commuter style bike. The brakes on this are unbranded, but they're 2-piston caliper, 180 millimeter rotors, front and back, and they feel good. They have a slight noise to them, but nothing outside of the ordinary, and a lot of that has to do with newer calipers. Do a stop from about 20 here. So 3, 2, 1. I mean, I had a tiny bit of a lockup, you might have heard it, and a little bit of an angle change in my rear tire, just a slight fishtail. But all in all, the brakes are certainly sufficient, and you don't really need anything else for a bike this light. So I don't know if you noticed in this throttle test or listened for it, but I really don't hear the motor much at all on this bike, and I love how quiet it is. And the torque sensor on it feels very natural, very smooth, and getting from 0 to 20 pedaling is way easier than the throttle. So let's do that. 3, 2, 1. Right there, feel the power within a half turn. And we're already at 20. So as you can see, that was substantially faster than the throttle, which the good news on that is, should you want to get up and go quickly with a couple turns of your legs, you can do that pretty fast. much faster than on the throttle. But if you want to hold it and chill, throttle's a great way to not pedal, relax, and just enjoy the ride. I really love having the front suspension fork on this. It just takes the edge off of bumps, drops, curbs, gutters, things like that, and just makes the overall ride better. It's got 5 levels of PAS, so we're in 5 right now. Let's try to go to 20 on level 1 and see how that looks. I don't know how that'll work out, but let's try it. 3, 2, 1. You can feel it immediately. It's definitely harder. So after about, I don't know what speed, but it definitely feels like I'm doing all the work. I can feel it a little bit. As soon as you go to PAS2, then you're right back at 20 miles an hour. Between the belt drivetrain and that silent motor and the smooth tires, the bike is virtually silent. I keep bringing that point up because it's a huge selling point for me. I like bikes that are smooth and quiet, and that's definitely what this is. All in all, it's going to be great for commuters, people who want to just get around with no fuss. A bike that's good at doing one thing, and that's being a solid get around town commuter. And it's not trying to be anything it's not. So I think they did a good job with this bike. It's clean, smooth, and quiet, and I definitely have no complaints. So let's go back and talk to Ben, and then we'll wrap this up. All right, guys, this is that point where we meet up with Ben, our in-house mechanic who has 20 plus years working on bikes, and some thoughts he will share about things he likes and some things to improve on the Radkick here. And I'm gonna step out of his way and let him just do his thing. But real quick, I want to say thank you to Feedback Sports. They've got a lineup of toolkits and specifically their stands. I'm a huge fan of this Pro HD aluminum rack. It's lightweight, it's easy to get around, but more importantly, it's super durable and stable, even with heavier bikes on it. If you guys have been fumbling with your own bike rack at home and know the struggles of a weak or just flexy bike rack, this is a complete game changer. If you want to check out their stuff, I'll put a link down below. And with that said, Ben, just go ahead and kick it off with things you like about the Radkick.
All right, thanks, Mike. It's a nice, simple bike. There's easy, great points to touch on, especially a bike at this price. It's packed full of cool stuff. So I'll always touch on a threadless steer tube and stem. From conversations in past, you'll know that I'll just cite the ease of replacement parts, how easy it is to find them, how strong they are, they're lighter. With this also being an adjustable stem, same thing. When you stand up on this bike, it's really firm, really strong. It doesn't flex, which sometimes with an adjustable stem will get some flex in that linkage or pivot area. So great job on this one, Rad Power. The cable management's pretty nice. It's simple. There's not too much going on up here. It doesn't look like a bowl of spaghetti, so I like what they've done there. The aluminum pedals, I've touched on this before as well. It just means that if and when this bike falls over, or somehow if you're transporting it, they can take more of a beating. They're not going to crack or break. So that's just less expense for a rider to have to incur if the pedals don't ever need to be replaced. So that's really awesome. The chain ring, or belt ring as it is a really nice machined aluminum piece. So if ever it does need to be replaced, man, it's going to be easy to do, but because of how robust it is, I don't see that happening. So I really like that. Of course, with a belt drive, I'm always a fan. Sign me up all day, every day, all month, all year. They're just smoother, quieter, less mess. It's just really the way to go, in my opinion. The rear dropouts on this bike, I think this is a notable thing. They're nice, strong, molded dropouts that are very easy to adjust. So when you get a belt drive on a bike, you have to tension it so that it's tensioned correctly and properly. With that, you've only got 2 small bolts, screws to loosen, and then 2 right in through here to bring the wheel back to tension the bolt. As Mike pointed out earlier, it's similar to how you would adjust the alternator on your vehicle on the engine bay. It just makes it really, really easy. And with a bike like this, man, it sure does make things nice.
Nice, man. What kind of things would you improve on a bike like the Radkick?
All right, great question. So with this one, I've pointed this out on some other bikes, but with the rack, it's only got 1 frame mount point. Okay, so the problem with that might be if the bolt here that fastens it to the rack to the fender rather, if that bolt breaks or somehow and the fender wallows out or you can't tighten it, all of a sudden this rack will kind of have a mind of its own. You'll put weight on it and it'll just fall back because it doesn't have any kind of secondary frame mount. So I really think that that's something that they could improve on in the future. And interestingly enough, there are mounts on the frame right here to be able to mount a secondary piece. So I feel like that's something that this bike should have. I've mentioned this before too. The bottom bracket spindle is an older school, older style square taper. It's okay because it's been around for decades and decades, sure, but there are better ones out there for probably not much more as a manufacturer cost. So for a stronger ride quality, even for a heavier rider, an oversized bottom bracket spindle will definitely do this one better. So with this one, part of the reason they're using these aluminum fenders is so that they can mount the rack. But if we go backwards and then find some secondary mounts for the frame, you can go with a plastic fender set that will be lighter and we'll be able to take some impacts and resist that a lot better. That's really all I've got to pick on this bike. Otherwise, for the price, for how simple it is, Mike, this thing is ready to go. It's awesome.
Yeah, agreed. It's been a good one. All right, thanks, Ben, for your time, and we'll catch you on the next one.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, guys, so that's it, the Radkick by Rad Power Bikes. I spent a week with it, testing it and riding it all over town, and I think it's really good at what it was designed to be, and that's a no-nonsense commuter that gives you everything you're gonna want, like racks and lighting and fenders, and nothing that you don't need. Now, for some people, the 35-mile range or the lack of just a super punchy motor might not fit what they're looking for, but for me, I found that everything from my 5-mile commute to home and back to riding around town, it just did a really good job of doing what it was designed to do. Now, if I missed anything about this bike that you want answered, just drop a comment down below. I do my best to personally reply to everybody, and I do appreciate the feedback. And if you guys haven't done so already, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. And until the next review, I'll see you guys out on the trail.